All right, Public Health 4040 students, we're still talking about material from Chapter 12 with infectious disease epidemiology. We left off talking about protozoas, where they're one-celled organisms that can either be free-living, living in the environment, or living within a host, or they can be parasitic in nature, where they can cause serious damage to animals and or to humans. Talked for a few minutes already about leishmaniasis and that transmission cycle with sandflies to humans, as well as with malaria being the most important vector-borne disease in the world, where millions of individuals are infected each year, and there's thousands and thousands of individuals that pass away as a result of that. Giardia, we're familiar with that one in the sense that we have the potential of becoming infected with that through drinking contaminated water sources, like when we're recreating in that. But cryptosporidia is also critically important. There's been a number of outbreaks of cryptosporidia in the United States as a result of swimming pool transmission occurrences. Cryptosporidia is hardy in the sense that you can still treat the water with chlorine, and the spores with that protozoa are still able to survive and not be killed by chlorine treatment. Protozoa can cause serious infections as well as death as a result. We're going to move over and talk just for a couple of minutes about helminths or worms. These are large multicellular organisms that can actually be seen, some of them with the naked eye. They can either be free-living out in the environment, or they can be parasitic in the sense that they can cause major infection within the human host. Typically, they're found in tropical areas, but we do have them here in the United States. Children as well as adults are infected with pinworms on a very normal, quite often, as well as tapeworms do actually occur here in the U.S. And the three types of helminths that we could go into and spend quite a bit of time with, and we do within the communicable disease, the three types is your flatworms, your thorny-headed worms, and your roundworms. And worms or helminths are responsible for many different diseases, be it trichinellosis or schistosomiasis, and they are significant in nature in some of the parts of the developing world. As I said, that they can either helminths can either be free-living or parasitic. Oftentimes they will have an environmental type life cycle, and then they will cause infection in the human host. Like for example, with some of them, the larvae will infect within the water source copepods, and then individuals will drink contaminated water, which will allow for the infectious stages within the human host. They can either be the eggs can either leave through the digestive tract, or sometimes the worms will migrate to the skin surface and then be released into the environment through that. It's interesting. I mean, you can get on the internet at any given time, and you can see these old commercials where you can buy a tapeworm and lose weight, and you can still even do that today. But when you look at the problems that are associated with that, it's not really worth the cost, even though one wants to maybe lose a few extra pounds. You can see here a common list of protozoa and helminths. As I said, with bacteria and with viruses and rickettsia, I don't expect you to memorize this particular list, but you can look through this. And some of you have had infections with this from maybe if you've traveled with malaria, but a number of them that are listed here, they cause serious type of illness within many parts of the world. One in here that's quite interesting is when you look at it is trichomoniasis. This is actually a sexually transmitted disease, and other ones like scabies, those cause intense itching due to the infections that occur in the skin, and I've already talked about with leishmaniasis and malaria. But if you are interested in learning more about these, I do recommend that you do take the communicable disease course. I also throw in prions into this, and you won't find this in the textbook, but prions are not necessarily a microorganism, but it is a scenario where it is infectious in nature. prions are defined as infectious proteins. And this is where you'll have a protein that has a different shape or a different conformation, and you can see this kind of towards at the bottom of the screen. These proteins are found in the brain as well as in the nervous tissue in that. And when you have this infection within the brain, the infected protein, when it comes into contact with normal protein, causes a conformational change. And at that point, it will cause the spongiform scenario, or this holy type of morphology within the brain, and it can ultimately cause a progressive degenerative disease of the central nervous system. A number of prions have made the news in the sense that with your bovine spongiform encephalopathy as well as scabies, both of those are animal-borne diseases. And the term that most of you may be familiar with those would be like your mad cow disease. But the human form of it is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's actually a genetic disorder where there are a certain number of individuals that will develop, a very small percentage of individuals in the world, that will develop this rare, incurable degenerative neurological disease. There's been actually in the news a number of individuals, like even here in Utah, a legislative individual a couple years ago actually was diagnosed and passed away quite quickly as a result of that. But I do include it because even though it isn't like a bacteria or a virus, this is considered an infectious protein, and if individuals take in or eat this infectious protein by accident, and that's what the real concern about it with mad cow disease, it can cause transmission and that degenerative disease as a result. I also include here arthropods. Now arthropods are not that microbial or the microbial infectious disease as you would see with your bacteria and your viruses, but they are important when it comes to understanding how transmission does occur with a number of these infectious diseases, and they can act as a method of transmission for these infectious diseases. And this includes mosquitoes, ticks, flies, not just sandflies. There's a number of flies that can transmit disease, as well as mites. And when you look at each of these pictures, many of you know these already, but as I go through these, it's interesting. You can think about some of the diseases. For example, with mosquitoes, we know that it can transmit dengue virus as well as malaria, West Nile virus. Ticks, you're familiar with ticks and their ability to be able to transmit, as I talked about earlier, with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but also with Lyme disease. Fleas are known for transmitting plague. You have your triatomine bug or your kissing bug, and they're able to transmit Chagas disease. You have your tsetse fly with your African sleeping sickness. You have your lice, and they're able to transmit louse-borne typhus. You have your sandflies that I talked about, and then you have this little one right down here. And the reason I include this is that there is no known disease that it transmits, but it's that icky factor that it does make the news. And this is your bedbug. They take blood meals like all the other insects that I have shown within on these images. But as I said, there are no known infectious diseases that it is able to transmit. But it does make the news in the sense that no one wants them in their home, and when you're traveling, you don't want to actually bring them home with you either. All right, we're going to stop here because I will be present in class moving forward, and we'll begin the material when I come back to class. And if you have additional questions about the slides as well as the chapter material that we've covered within this recorded lecture, bring the questions to class, or email me, or come to my office. I'd be happy to talk with you about each of these as you prepare for your exams as well as you continue to learn. All right, thanks a lot.